My family was my world, my wife, Marie, and our 3 children. Charlie, our eldest at 8, was serious and dependable, the kind of boy who always thought things through. Kathy, at 6, was full of life, her curiosity and laughter filling every corner of the house. And then there was Trixie, our little 3-year-old, still in the chubby, giggling stage of childhood. Every moment with them mattered to me. But lately, it felt as if something important was slipping through my fingers. Marie was the heart of our family. She balanced everything, work, the kids, and me, with grace, even when life pulled her in every direction. I admired her strength and the love she poured into all of us. But over the past few months, I noticed a change. She seemed distracted, a little more withdrawn, like her mind was somewhere else. I told myself it was just the grind of daily life, yet a nagging doubt crept in. When she mentioned a cruise with Edna, a friend from work, I encouraged her to go. Marie worked so hard, and she deserved time to relax. But something didn't sit right. Her words were casual, but her eyes told a different story. Over the next few weeks, my unease grew, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why. On the day of her trip, I decided to surprise her at the dock with our kids. I wanted to send her off with a gesture of love, but deep down, I needed to see her reaction. When she spotted us, she put on a show of surprise, hands to her face, a playful gasp, but I could see past it. Her excitement felt forced, her smile rehearsed. As she lingered, waiting to board, I knew the truth. She wasn't on a trip with Edna. She wasn't just taking a break from her responsibilities. My wife, the woman I loved, was walking away from us, from me. While she scanned the crowd for me, I was already heading home. The drive felt like a blur, my mind racing as I packed my things. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen table, along with my phone. Then I walked out, knowing there was no coming back. I didn't know where I was going as I left the house, but I knew I couldn't stay. The home I'd built with Marie, the life we'd crafted together, it all felt like a cruel facade. Each room carried her touch, her love, but now every memory seemed tainted. I drove aimlessly for hours, my thoughts a storm of anger, heartbreak, and confusion. How had it come to this? How had I missed the signs? Eventually, I found myself at my brother Paul's place. He opened the door, startled by my appearance. I hadn't thought to clean myself up or prepare an explanation. I just stood there, holding my duffel bag, unable to form the words. Paul didn't ask questions. He stepped aside and let me in, offering a quiet space to sit and gather myself. The first night was unbearable. I couldn't sleep, haunted by the image of Marie at the dock, the kids beside her, all unaware of the betrayal I had uncovered. I replayed every moment of the past year in my head, searching for the clues I must have overlooked. The late nights at work. The sudden bursts of energy followed by quiet exhaustion. The way her phone was always within reach but never quite in sight. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Paul, sensing my turmoil, tried to distract me with small talk and offers to help, but I couldn't bring myself to confide in him. Instead, I stayed in his guest room, staring at the walls, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. By the third day, Paul couldn't take my silence any longer. "Steve, you need to tell me what's going on," he said, his voice firm but kind. And so I did. I told him everything, the cruise, the lies, the months of doubt that had finally crystallized into certainty. Paul listened without judgment, though his face hardened when I mentioned Marie's coworker. "You need to focus on the kids," he said when I finished. "Whatever's happening between you and Marie, they need their dad. They're going to be confused, scared even, and you're the one they'll look to for stability." His words hit me like a gut punch. He was right, of course. My children were innocent in all of this, yet they stood to lose the most. I couldn't let my anger or heartbreak overshadow their needs. I called my parents that evening. They were stunned, their voices trembling as I explained what had happened. My mother cried, devastated by the news, while my father struggled to contain his anger. They offered their support, urging me to come stay with them, but I declined. I didn't want to uproot the kids further than necessary. Instead, I told them I'd visit with the children later in the week. For now, I needed space to think. The following day, I met with a lawyer. Filing for divorce felt surreal, like I was erasing the most important chapter of my life. But there was no other option. Trust was the foundation of our marriage, and Marie had shattered it. The legal process was a blur of documents and decisions, each one more painful than the last. I requested joint custody of the kids, though I knew I wanted them with me as much as possible. I didn't want to punish Marie, this wasn't about revenge, but I couldn't ignore the anger that simmered beneath the surface. Through all of this, I avoided seeing Marie. I couldn't face her yet. Not while the betrayal was still fresh, and my emotions so raw. I left my communication with her to our lawyers, trusting them to handle the logistics while I focused on the kids. On the rare occasions I allowed myself to think of her, it was like picking at an open wound. I loved her deeply, but that love now felt poisoned. I couldn't understand how she could risk everything we had built for something so fleeting, so meaningless. Did she ever think of the life we shared, the future we had planned? Or had she convinced herself that it didn't matter anymore? Paul stayed by my side, offering quiet support when I needed it and space when I didn't. His wife, Emily, made sure I ate, dropping off meals when she noticed my appetite dwindling. I hated feeling like a burden, but I was too broken to stand on my own. The turning point came when Kathy called. Her little voice on the other end of the line was both a comfort and a reminder of what truly mattered. "Daddy, when are you coming home?" she asked, her words tinged with confusion. "Soon, sweetheart," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I miss you so much." "I miss you too. Mommy says you're staying with Uncle Paul. Are you mad at us?" Her innocence broke me. "No, Bobby, never. I love you and Charlie and Trixie more than anything." That conversation gave me the clarity I needed. Whatever had happened with Marie, my children deserved the best version of me I could give them. I couldn't let my heartbreak define me or rob them of their father. The days after leaving felt endless, consumed by a swirl of emotions I couldn't escape. Anger, betrayal, sorrow, they took turns pulling at me, leaving me exhausted but unable to rest. My brother Paul offered me shelter, a place to think, but even there, the weight of what had happened followed me. Every quiet moment seemed to replay the memories of Marie's distance, her lies, and the realization of what she had risked. The house I had left behind wasn't just bricks and mortar, it was the life we had built together. Every corner held a memory, every room a part of our story. And now, it felt as though those memories had been torn apart, leaving only the shards of a life I thought was unbreakable. In those first days, I focused on survival. I filed for divorce, a decision that felt both impossible and inevitable. Sitting in a lawyer's office, signing papers that unraveled over a decade of partnership, was surreal. I couldn't stop wondering if Marie had felt even a fraction of this devastation while she made her choices. I avoided seeing her, speaking to her, or even thinking of her whenever I could. Yet, she was everywhere, in the photos I refused to look at, in the stories my children told, and in the memories that invaded my mind at night. Even as I tried to shut her out, my love for her lingered, taunting me with what had been. The children were my anchor. They were innocent in all of this, their world thrown into chaos by choices they didn't understand. I returned to them as often as I could, holding on to their laughter, their smiles, and their questions about when things would go back to normal. Kathy's excitement, Trixie's giggles, and even Charlie's quiet watchfulness reminded me of what truly mattered. But the cracks were showing. Charlie seemed withdrawn, carrying a heaviness that was far too much for a boy his age. Kathy, usually so spirited, asked questions I wasn't ready to answer. Trixie clung to me more than usual, sensing the unease even if she couldn't understand it. Marie, to her credit, tried to reach out. She sent emails filled with regret and apologies, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. The words sat unread for days before I finally opened one, late at night when sleep was impossible. Her pain was clear in every line, her sorrow undeniable. But her actions had shattered the foundation of our life together, and no apology could change that. When the house-sharing arrangement began, stepping back into that space felt like reopening a wound. Everything was as I had left it, down to the photos on the walls and the small touches that made it feel like home. But it wasn't home anymore. It was a reminder of what I had lost, of what Marie had chosen to betray. The kids adapted more easily than I had expected. Kathy and Trixie seemed to bounce back, their resilience a testament to their innocence. Charlie, however, was different. He carried the weight of what he couldn't say, his emotions buried beneath his usual stoicism. I arranged therapy for him, hoping it would help him navigate the confusion and hurt I knew he was feeling. Time passed in fragments, measured in the children's laughter and their questions, in the alternating weeks in a house that felt both familiar and foreign. My days were filled with work and parenting, while my nights were haunted by what could have been. Marie's presence lingered like a ghost, visible in the smallest details of the life we had built. The first time I saw her again, it was at Kathy's school play. From a distance, she looked like the woman I had fallen in love with, confident, graceful, radiant. But when our eyes met, I saw the shadow of regret in her gaze. I nodded, acknowledging her silently, and for a moment, I felt something beyond anger. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was the beginning of something softer, a quiet acceptance of the distance between us. Watching her leave with the kids that night, I realized how much had changed. We were no longer partners but two separate lives orbiting around the same children. The ache of that realization was sharp, but it carried a strange clarity. What we had was over, and now, all that mattered was the life we could give our children. Marie had broken something I had thought was unbreakable, but I wouldn't let that define me or my future. The children needed me to be strong, to be their anchor in this storm. And slowly, step by step, I was learning how to be that for them. In the months that followed, I settled into the rhythms of my new life. Alternating weeks in the house, parenting without a partner, and slowly rebuilding myself from the inside out became my reality. Each day felt like a small victory, getting the kids to school on time, sharing a meal around the dinner table, or hearing Trixie giggle while Kathy told one of her wild stories. These moments reminded me that even though my marriage had ended, I still had a purpose. Charlie's therapy sessions helped him open up, and little by little, I saw the heaviness lift from his shoulders. He returned to building model airplanes and reading his favorite books, his quiet focus a source of pride for me. Kathy's resilience shone through, her laughter and curiosity lighting up the house during my weeks with them. And Trixie, my baby, was as joyful as ever, her world still full of wonder despite the changes around her. Marie and I maintained a fragile peace. We communicated about the children but avoided personal conversations. I couldn't bring myself to forgive her, but I no longer burned with anger when her name came up. She had broken my trust in ways that couldn't be repaired, but I realized that my love for her, though deeply scarred, hadn't completely disappeared. It existed now as a bittersweet memory of what we once had. I focused on giving the kids stability. On my weeks with them, I cooked meals, helped with homework, and took them on small adventures, bike rides, movie nights, trips to the park. I wanted to show them that life could still be filled with joy, even if it looked different now. One evening, while flipping through old photo albums, I found myself staring at a picture from our wedding day. Marie's smile was radiant, her eyes full of hope, and my own expression was one of pure joy. It was a stark contrast to the quiet reality I now faced. I closed the album and placed it back on the shelf, deciding to leave those memories where they belonged, in the past. Marie's efforts to repair what had been broken didn't go unnoticed. She was attentive to the kids, trying to be present in ways she hadn't before. But her attempts to reconnect with me were met with silence. I couldn't go back. The man who had once adored her with all his heart was gone, replaced by someone who loved her only as the mother of his children. By the time our divorce was finalized, the bitterness had faded, replaced by a calm acceptance. We divided our assets fairly, shared custody of the kids, and agreed to keep the house as a shared space until they were grown. The life we had built was over, but I took comfort in knowing we had done what was best for the children. One evening, during my week with the kids, Charlie asked to sit with me on the porch. As the sun set, painting the sky in soft hues, he spoke quietly. "Dad, do you think we'll ever all live together again?" His words pierced my heart, but I didn't let it show. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But no matter what, your mom and I both love you more than anything. That will never change." He nodded, seeming to find some peace in my answer, and leaned against me. In that moment, I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting or moving on entirely. It was about finding a way to live with the scars and still embrace the life ahead. The days turned into months, and eventually, the ache of loss dulled. I began to see a future where happiness was possible, not the happiness I had once imagined with Marie, but a different kind of contentment. One built on the love I had for my children and the strength I had found in myself. Marie and I would never be the same, but we had built something that would last, our children. They were our greatest accomplishment, and I was determined to give them the love and stability they deserved. As I watched Trixie chase fireflies in the yard that evening, with Kathy twirling beside her and Charlie looking up at the stars, I felt a flicker of hope. My family had been broken, but it wasn't beyond saving. It would take time, patience, and a lot of love, but we would find our way. And so, I began to rebuild, not the life I had lost, but the life that was still ahead of me. If you found this story meaningful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more stories that explore life's challenges and the strength it takes to overcome them.